the biggest expectations that weighed on me were usually self-expectations, Robert, because I'm not a people pleaser. When I was young and didn't have much self-awareness, I was overly harsh in my leadership or cut people's legs out from under them without realizing what I was doing, talking in my 20s. As I grew older, the self-awareness didn't come all that quickly, but it was my own expectations that led me to burnout, especially in the beginning. I'm a high achiever. I was an overworker, a workaholic for a while. It was the constant internal pressure of what I thought I should be doing, to be a good pastor or to be the leader or to grow the church or whatever the challenge might be.
Thriving in Tandem. It's a podcast for you, the married entrepreneur that wants to win in business and marriage at the same time.
Welcome to Thriving in Tandem.
All right, hey, Thriving in Tandem family, welcome back to this week's podcast.
Hi, family.
And honey, how we talk about how we warn our entrepreneur friends and clients about, overworking and doing too much because it can lead to burnout, right?
Yes, we do.
Sometimes some listen earlier than others. But eventually they do learn. But sometimes it takes really some hard issues. It's almost like you have to hit rock bottom, right?
It's almost like your body has to say, no more. I'm stopping. I'm not doing this.
Yeah. So we love it when people take, a little bit of our wisdom, because obviously we come from experience, and also not just our own experience, but from other clients, right? And there's the same symptoms and you see the same road they're going down. And so today we've got some great guests, Kent and Gina Murawski. And well, they got that story. Oh. So this is going to be interesting because I think this is the first time we've had a couple that were both in the ministry side and business. And you know me, honey, being a pastor's kid.
Yes.
And so it'd be kind of interesting to share some kind of war stories. But
I'm sure you guys have a lot of things in common.
Yes, I think when we first met at the mastermind, we're like, oh, you too? Anyways, but Kent and Gina, they're living proof that the best partnerships start with head over heels moments. Nearly 25 years ago, honey, Gina took one look at Kent and decided he was the one.
Really?
Of course. This is his version because I'm reading his bio. So we'll have to hear Gina's side, right? But together they built a family and legacy of service, having planted and led Journey Church in Cambridge, Massachusetts from 2009 to 2023, while Kent now currently coaches high-achieving leaders and writes books in his signature uniform of plain T-shirts and dark jeans. He's like one of those trendy guys. He's been hanging out in SoCal too long. Gina transforms lives as a certified holistic nutritionist and supplement specialist. I knew you'd like to hear this.
Oh, of course she does. Well, because I'm sure that came in handy.
I know you want to pick her brain about this.
Well, yeah, but burnout, that comes in handy.
Because her journey with celiac disease sparked a passion for helping others navigate life without gluten, all while sporting her distinctive boho style. I don't know what that means. I wasn't sure if that was supposed to be Bono style or boho style, but anyways, I'm going to read it the way it's written. Boho style and newest coffee mug acquisition. Yes, the collection is still growing. So apparently there's an issue here. So we're going to get into. These days, you'll find them walking side by side in life and business, sharing their complimentary wisdom about sustainable success, holistic wellness, and authentic leadership, always with a cup of coffee in the hand. So welcome to the show, Kent and Gina.
It's good to be here. That was a mouthful. Sorry for such a long bio.
I know. Well, I cut it down. No, but I had to chuckle as I'm reading, so I'm like, I just got to read this. So, Kent and Gina, welcome. No, well, seriously, welcome to the show. I've known Kent for at least 2 years, if not 3. We're part of the same mastermind group with Mike Kim, and so gotten to know him over the years and sharing some stories and all that. And now that he's about to release his new book, I thought it's be a great time to have him on the show. So yeah, so thanks for popping on, because I know it's a little cold and dreary out there in Boston area, but how you guys doing?
Doing well. We're getting snowed on. I like it. I'm a winter fan. Gina, I'll let her speak for herself.
Don't like the winter too much, but we get through it. So
I just stay inside, I guess.
You just endure it, right?
I say if it's winter, let it snow. So I'm a skier and such, and some of my kids ski and others don't.
Yeah.
Gina does other things. She likes sitting by the fire. that we don't have. We don't have a fireplace.
Oh, you don't have a
Oh, gotta
fireplace?
get one. Gotta get one of those little, portable things you put in there in the room. Yeah,
We do turn on Netflix though, and
The fireplace on Netflix. That's not the same though, Kent.
And then what do you do? Like get a portable heater, like
Yeah,
a
how
space
does it keep
heater,
you
and
warm?
just blast it so you can feel the heat.
I mean, we do have heat, but just not the fireplace.
Blanket.
Yeah. So we both like to ski too, but Kaylee's like Gina, more the summer girl. I like the winter, but I don't like to live in it.
Mm-hmm. We
And
like to go visit it and ski in it.
And so what was funny was just last night, I believe, we're going for our evening walk. So we're here in Pasadena, California, right? So evening walk, it's maybe 58-ish, whatever, right around there. Right. And so she's
I knew you were gonna tell a story.
She's gearing up, right? Because we have had a little bit of rain. So she's gearing up. She's got her not a thermo, but that insulated
I got like a puffer jacket.
and
I got your
my
coat that's for rain
she's
with
trying
the
to put,
hoodie.
and she's trying to put this other sweatshirt.
And then I got another sweatshirt on.
And so we're walking down the stairs. I'm looking at her. She's all puffy, right? And I'm laughing. I'm
like
like
the Pillsbury Doughboy.
Honey, you're dressed much more more warm than when we were in Lima, Ohio 2 weeks ago, and it was -24 wind chill.
But I didn't go outside unless I had to get in the car.
But she's like,
I couldn't pack all that stuff in my suitcase.
it was just funny. I'm like, Daddy, it's like there's a 80 degree difference here. So let's get right into this. I got a question for you right off the bat. Knowing that you've been in ministry and now you're coaching entrepreneurs and having your own business, and then Gina, you're pretty much in business on your own too. But building a business and a ministry are pretty similar in my view. I mean, I'm a pastor's kid, so growing up in that environment and also being a business owner now, But I think, seems to me, in my opinion, building a ministry can cause even more strain on the family than just building a business, because I feel there's higher expectations from the customers / congregation, right, that people put on pastors. What was your experience like during that time, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, working on building a business now and having done ministry, there are similarities for sure, especially when we started a church and then we started a business a few years ago when we transitioned. There's similarities for sure. A lot of the leadership challenges are similar. Some of the pressures are similar. If you're a person of faith, then you walk by faith, no matter what you do. So all those are similar. I think you're right that sometimes the expectations of people is different. And I think there's a spiritual aspect as well to starting or being in ministry where you have a target on your back and there is a real enemy. So, but yeah, I think with expectations of people, I think sometimes they expect the pastors to do everything, be there for everything, things that are sometimes unreasonable. And I'll let Gina speak, for herself, but she, with the kids and the pastor's wife, we served together, but there was also expectations that were unspoken. I think, and those are some of the hardest, because I'm kind of out there in the way I lead. So I bring those things to the forefront, but I think, Gina and the kids sometimes felt like there was all these unspoken expectations that were hard. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I think just with being a pastor's wife or being in ministry, there's just this underlying, okay, you're not even sure what to expect, what they're expecting of you, and that in and of itself is an expectation, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
From one moment to the next, you're not sure if they're should I be like this? Should I be like that? It's very hard to sort of be yourself in the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And that it took me a while to kind of find my footing a little bit with what it really meant to be a minister's wife or a pastor's wife. And even to the very end, I still felt like I was still trying to find my footing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it can definitely be challenging, especially when you have young kids and trying to raise a family at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, just to give you a tangible example, Robert, too, sometimes what would happen people would say things to her that they won't come and say to me, because they kind of knew how I led. And so she got really comfortable with just saying I don't know about that. Why don't you go ask my husband? You know,
There you go.
so
It took me a while to get there. But yeah, I would more speak for the areas that I could speak to, and if I couldn't, I had to get comfortable with sending them to Kent or another, department.
And Gina wasn't our kids.
Person.
She wasn't our kids director. She was our worship pastor. So
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's good, because otherwise I think sometimes they're trying to play one against the other, because
I was
we know
thinking that too.
what Kent's going to say. We don't like that answer already. So,
Gina.
let's go Gina.
exactly.
Right, we just have to play.
Like kids.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I led off this conversation with the topic of expectations, because I think that's what partially starts to lead to potential burnout, because there's expectations that other people put on you, but then there's expectations we put on ourselves and also with each other as husband and wife, and then there's the kids. And I think with the weight of expectations, we are trying to figure out ways to please everybody. I don't know if that's it. So can you speak to that, Gina, about that the weight of expectations and how that kind of leads towards the road to burnout?
Yeah. Oh, well, I'll just start off by saying, if there were People Pleasers Anonymous, I would be
Yeah, I'm with you.
the first member.
We could be co-chair. We could be co-chairs.
Right here. So that's so difficult to be a people pleaser and then to be in a role like that. I had to get really comfortable with saying no, which was very hard, saying no to some things. But yeah, that's probably one of my biggest lessons that I needed to learn was, not letting the expectations weigh me down, and not letting the expectations be almost not letting them define who I was as a person. Yeah. And not, just wanting to be me, wanting to be known as Gina, not Gina, Kent's wife, or Gina, the pastor's wife. That's, that was a big challenge as well.
Yeah. What about you, Kent? How did expectations weigh on you?
I mean, the biggest expectations that weighed on me were usually self-expectations, Robert, because I'm not a people pleaser. I'm the opposite. So when I was young and didn't have much self-awareness, I was overly harsh in my leadership or cut people's legs out from under them without realizing what I was doing, talking in my 20s. As I grew older, the self-awareness didn't come all that quickly, but it was my own expectations that led me to burnout, especially in the beginning. I'm a high achiever. I was an overworker, a workaholic for a while. It was the constant internal pressure of what I thought I should be doing to be a good pastor or to be the leader or to grow the church or whatever the challenge might be.
So yeah, tell us, that road to, I guess, burnouts, but talk to us about that time in ministry and how you kind of got to this point of, hey, this isn't healthy.
Yeah. Well, it came really early for me. We were married about 2 years at the time, and I was set to go to a training conference for college ministry. And instead of going to this conference, I collapsed on the floor at 27 years old and curled up in a ball and cried for what felt like a couple hours. Gina might be able to tell you how long it actually was, but I was having a nervous breakdown. Didn't know why, didn't understand what was happening. And as I began to climb out of the hole over the next few months after that, I realized, I was overworking. So I had a full-time job, and I was the college and young adult pastor, and we were leading worship for a church of 400 people, volunteer. So I was working all the time. I was doing things that were out of my strength zone. That was a big part of it. Like I was just taking on things to take them on. And so I wasn't paying attention to the signs leading up to that. I was anxious, which, like crawling out of my skin anxious when I was trying to sleep at night. I felt down and depressed, which wasn't my normal demeanor. All these things that I thought I could power through until I couldn't anymore.
Wow. So Gina, did you see any warning signs, or what was going on before that collapse? I mean,
I'm sure she's
laughing. Yes, and yes, I did see some warning signs. We were very young. Um, I was 24. He was 27. Um, was I even pregnant? Was I pregnant
Not
at the
yet.
time?
I don't think so.
I can't quite remember that time frame. I think we were both walking around kind of like zombies, honestly. At that time, we were both overworked. We were both volunteering. We were both like, yes, yes, yes to everything. And I think some of the warning signs um, that I did notice what was some of the depression and being down, because that's totally not his personality. So when I saw him kind of withdrawing, there were some warning signs there, but also being so young, I don't feel like I knew what to do. I don't feel like we had the tools or even knew who to ask for help or how to reach out for help. And what are we, isn't this what we're supposed to be doing?
mhm,
Isn't this how ministry goes? You just, you work and work until you can't work anymore. I mean, it was naivety, I think, in a lot of ways. Just thinking that we could do everything all the time and until he couldn't anymore.
Well,
yeah,
it's like a double-edged sword too,
Yeah.
because you're doing it for God, quote
right,
unquote, right?
right,
And
right.
so you think you have to spend yourself and, you know, emotional intelligence, mental health, taking care of yourself. All those things they weren't encouraged, first of all, but they were far from us at that age.
Yeah,
Well, it kind of takes over your identity, right? Like
Uh,
always doing, saying
Yeah.
yes.
there
Yeah.
was. I was speaking to a group of pastors, church planners, actually a few weeks ago, and we're talking about this type of subject. And one gal, she goes, yeah, there's a professor in seminary who would say, yeah, if you find like not just ministries but like just volunteers, if you find a good volunteer, it's like you ride that horse until it dies. And I'm like, wow, that is so healthy.
Um,
And is that how you grow your church?
Yeah,
Unfortunately, I think that happens, especially sometimes when you're in planting phase,
Yeah.
because you're just looking for
income.
anyone to fill the slot, and it's not healthy for them. It's not healthy for you.
No.
The way that we're church planting, I think, in our modern culture, with some of the methods and such, are conducive to that. Unfortunately,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's unlike start a business, right? Same thing. You've got limited resources, so we're trying to do more than we can. We're trying to bat above our basic hitting average, basically. And so, what do you say to that? Because I'm sure you've got a different perspective now, not only how you're building your own business, but also as you're working with high achieving business owners and leaders yourself. So what do you say to that?
yeah, I try to. So I'll speak for myself, and then for some of the high achievers that I'm serving. I think for myself, you have to learn to live within your limits, and I
Mm-hmm.
think how to best do that, from my perspective, is people call this different things. You have the Clifton strengths, you've got, Gay
Mm-hmm.
Hendricks, the zone of genius.
Mm-hmm.
But the basis of it is you find your strengths, the
Mm-hmm.
things that you're good at and bring you joy, and you focus the majority of your attention
Right.
on those things.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's how I live. I try to live that way and live very simply. And then I encourage high achievers to do the same. Now, again, it's harder in startup phase. That's a whole different animal sometimes, but you have to learn to live within your limits. Because if you don't, if you live outside your limits for too long in any particular area, there will be consequences, whether you like them or not. So simplicity and living within your limits, I think, are a couple things that I live by.
Yeah. So you apply that to all aspects of your life, not just your business.
Absolutely. I think as far as how it translates into the rest of my life, I have a life plan, to be honest with you,
Mm-hmm.
Robert. And
Yeah.
what the life plan is it's an intentional plan to live according to your most closely held values and the things that are most important. and I keep those things regularly before me. And I have a way, it's kind of like it's like a way of, it's like a dashboard right on your car. You can pay attention to it. And when things are flashing, you're like, oh, I need to put attention here. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's one of the things that helped me. If you're talking in church speak, and they called that, the ancients called that a rule of life. And rule just refers to a trellis where you would hang things. Like if you picture a grapevine, right? There was a trellis or a piece of wood or a wire that goes between them that you tie the vine to, that holds it up off of the dirt and allows the sunlight to get to it and allows it to grow. So a rule of life is really like a way of living where you hang the most important things on that trellis and pay attention to them.
Yeah, that's good. So is that something the two of you work together on? The life plan?
Do you want to?
Or you have separate ones?
So I've had a life plan for a while. I think Gina lives the principles. I'm really structured. She's not. So we kind of live this in different ways. I don't know if you want to share about some of the ways that you live that, as opposed, you don't have a formal life plan, but
No, I don't have a formal life plan. I think I've honestly, I'm not just saying this because we're on your podcast, but I've learned a lot from Ken over the years, because I'm just a not super structured person, just kind of like fly by the seat of my pants, kind of just spontaneous. But when I met him and we got married, I started to dream more, think about what I wanted more out of my life. I kind of saw how he's so intentional about everything. I mean, everything that he does, there is intention behind it. And so I think a lot of what I do is honestly because of things that I've learned from him. And so I do some of those things loosely, some of the same things he was talking about, but not quite as, I guess, structured, if that's the word.
I mean, we're pretty similar.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she's more
On the spontaneous one, you got the plan.
Although, you know, I don't know if
you are kind of rubbing off on me.
I was going to say, I don't know about you guys, but we kind of start to rub off on each other.
Absolutely.
And so I remember when we launched our book in 2022, and we do that 6-week drive around the country,
book tour, road
and
trip.
I had kind of mapped it out. We're doing a full loop around the country, like the northern states, the East Coast, and the southern states coming home. And I remember we're having our weekly meeting, and she's like, okay, what's the plan? What's the objective for this whole road trip? And I said, okay, the number one thing is if we have fun, it's a success. And she's like, fun? That's it? And I'm looking at her, I'm like, what? I thought you'd be happy. I'm like,
I'm all about the fun, but I'm like, we gotta get some business in here too,
So I said, yeah, there's, here's the cities where we're actually going to speak. And then, but, a built-in margin so that we had opportunity, well, number one, to enjoy where we're going, because we did want to see the country. We want to make it a fun trip too. And then who knows who we might meet or get introduced to. And so like that. So it kind of had room for spontaneity.
Mm-hmm.
But then there were sometimes things that were structured when we actually had dates and times to talk. But it was kind of funny. I'm looking at it. I was like, well, I thought you'd be happy to be more spontaneous.
And just have fun.
Yeah. Here she's like, what's the objective? And I'm like, what? I was like, who are you?
I've been hanging out with you too long, honey. You're rubbing off on me.
That's funny.
To your point, Robert, I mean, I think Gina was talking about, the things that she's gleaned from me, but in the same way, one of the big things that I've learned to do differently is to slow down. So I used to, and I'll be really honest here, when we were young in our marriage, I didn't look at Gina holding me back. I just sometimes felt like I wanted to go, and she didn't want to. And I sometimes looked at that as like a detriment. And as I grew in our relationship and grew older, I realized it's like the kite analogy, right? I don't know if you ever heard this, but when you send a kite up in the air, and you're holding on to the string, if you let go of the string, it'll just fly free. But what actually happens is the kite will collapse to the ground. Mm-hmm. So Gina, the way that she lived, the spontaneity, she likes to live much slower, the way she just is present in the moment, she was holding on to my kite string. And I realized over time that without her influence in my life, I would have fallen so many more times hard to the ground.
Yeah, that's good. So what about you, Gina? How's you kind of alluded to a little bit how's Kent kind of rubbed off on you, and how do you learn to appreciate that?
Yeah, I think when I first met him, I didn't really have a lot of dreams for my life. I just didn't think that's not really how I grew up. I didn't really grow up in a family that was like, you can do anything that you want to do, that you put your mind to. That wasn't sort of how our family was. And so when I met him, he had all these dreams and all these goals, and he was talking about goals this and goals that. I'm like, I don't have any goals. I just live day by day. That was me. Day by day, wake up, whatever the day brings. But the sort of downfall of that in some ways is that it's almost like you let life live you instead of you living life. You can get to that point where things would happen, and good stuff and even bad stuff, and you just let it happen. And in a few years, I looked back and was like, I'm really not living life. And so he sort of, the way that he approached life rubbed off on me in the ways that I started to think about things that I wanted to do with my life, think about having goals, think about having dreams, career wise. And I went back to school a few years ago. I don't think I would have ever done that without, his influence. So, yeah, lots of ways. And 25 years of, what it's like, bro. Not all amazing, but also a lot of good parts. And
so I'd imagine, just like us, in the early years, some of those differences created some conflict.
Yes. Big conflict, Robert.
Make sure I know big. It's funny, right? Like when we're dating, those differences are cute, endearing, charming, romantic. Then all of a sudden when you say I do, it's like, you're an idiot.
Me. You're annoying.
Yeah. So talk to us a little about that real quick as we transition.
I mean, we both came from divorced families, and I don't think either of us knew how to communicate well. My example was screaming and yelling. Had an alcoholic father, chaotic home, 3 sisters, and my mom.
Oh my God!
Mom's one. She was one of the reasons for the chaos. My mom's a saint. She's wonderful. She's still alive. My dad has passed on. But yeah, I think our communication styles were so different. We didn't know how to communicate. I had anger problems, Robert. I was not self-aware, like I mentioned with my burnout. And it was the first 2 or 3 years were, I don't know, they were really hard. The first 7 years.
Yeah,
really,
I was going to say
honest.
more than 3, I feel.
It was longer than that.
It felt like 10.
So we started getting some help, but so it was difficult.
Yeah.
So
wait. So I read that you guys went to marriage counseling 2 different times, honey. See, you thought one was bad enough.
We went 2 years in a row.
Marital, but they went 2 different times. So see, you thought that was.
We got a master's degree, honey. We got 2. We went on a 2-year plan. So what are you trying to say, honey?
I'm just saying you lucked out, honey. Because Kent and Gina went twice.
I wish we had done the counseling. We did about it 7 years. I wish we would have done it way earlier. And then we did about year 14 or 15. And I just encourage couples now. I'm like, don't wait till you're having some big problem in your marriage. Like, do it as a tune-up. You take your car into the shop for a tune-up. Like every so often, just it's helpful to have somebody to sit with and have a different perspective and tell them the problems you're running into. And it was really, the second time especially, was transforming for us.
Especially if you've been married for a long time, like we've been married almost 25 years, and you change. I mean, hopefully you're changing, right? Hopefully you're changing and growing, but you change so much sometimes that, like I used to keep everything in and not talk about anything. And then, as I grew older and grew more self-aware, I started talking about things. Our communication styles change, things change. And so I think that couples counseling can just really help you sort of even navigate those changing times a little bit better.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. So as we kind of wrap up here, I can't believe it's already been a half an hour, but let's kind
Yeah.
of bring it back to the burnout issue. So we kind of laid out that stuff. So how do you, a lot of the work you do, Kent, and I'm sure Gina does too in her own right, about really helping and coaching these high achievers to not do what I did.
Yeah.
Right. So give us a couple practical tips on how you can live a life and avoid burnout, but live in purpose.
Yeah, so I won't go through I'll go through the framework quickly, the 4 parts. I won't get into it deeply, but so I call it the rhythms of rest, REST framework. And if you picture the four chamber, and there's a heart in the middle, it's four overlapping circles. If you picture, it's like the four chambers of a heart. Every particular chamber is necessary and needed for the heart to flow right. And so what that stands for is the R stands for relational rhythms, the E stands for emotional and mental rhythms. The S stands for spiritual rhythms or your philosophy of life. And the T stands for tangible rhythms. And what I mean by that is your work, your finances, your physical health. And so really what I try to, we don't get into this often right on the front end when I coach leaders, because really they come to me because something's burning down, right? Like, I have a staff problem. They might be burning out. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. I've got too much. I can't manage my time. So we kind of untangle the mess first, and then after we lay it all on the table and start rebuilding, that's when I usually introduce this and really help them look at those four different areas. Because a leader, or whether you're leading a business, a church, sometimes what happens is we just don't know. We have one or two areas working right, but the other two aren't, and we don't know what's wrong. We don't know how to fix it. And so this kind of gives you a gauge to know what to pay attention to. And under each of those four areas, I have three things, which I won't go into all that, but that's just a little bit about how I really help leaders put together a life plan to live intentionally and pay attention to the most.
How much of that would be your purpose and clarity guide?
Or
is it the
the
rest
purpose
assured?
and clarity guide is one aspect of the rhythms of rest framework. So I do have a blog series on my website. There's lots of resources on there about the rhythms.
And you
of
got
rest.
your book, Rest Assured.
Rest Assured is about another one particular aspect. That book is about Sabbath.
Gotcha.
Or a day of rest. And really that one's one of those anchor ones, Robert. Like if you can learn how to shut down for 24 hours, the word Sabbath is really simple. It just means to cease or stop. And so if you can learn to shut down your work life for just 24 hours and rest, if you're a person of faith, worship and delight, it will have massive effects on your life, on your business. I'll give you one quick story. I serve this one particular leader running a business, and he came to me. He was working 80 or 100 hours a week, just like off the grid, anxious, like really frustrated about his life, had been doing that for 4 or 5 years. Within the first 2 months, we got him taking a 24-hour period of rest and Sabbath. His life has radically changed and shifted, because if you're a person of faith, if you're a follower of Christ, it's actually a radical act of faith to slow down and stop for 24 hours and not open your computer, not check your email, not do work. And it's one of those anchor rhythms that I often help people establish up front.
Oh yeah, and there's plenty of physiological, secular research around the benefits of just you got to rest. I mean, it's kind of funny. I even do a Sabbath for technology. So on my Sabbath on Saturday, it's actually technology too, no social media and all that stuff.
Wonderful.
And I remember that first time I did that, first Saturday I did that. It's almost like I was going through withdrawals.
Did you have a twitch?
Well, it's like, it's like you're a drug addict. You're going through withdrawals. You didn't know what to do. You get really anxious because you're out and about, but you don't have your phone, and you're just like, oh my gosh, what if, so it's funny. But, what's interesting is, the Sabbath, obeying the Sabbath is like one of the 10 commandments. And I tell some folks at church, I'm like, it's that important that it's up there with thou shalt not kill. And yet it's the one commandment we pretty much all violate. Right.
Yeah.
And so imagine it's important. It made the top 10, so it's got to mean something. And you're right. I mean, and there's a spiritual aspect, but there's the emotional and mental and physical. But we feel everything's all interconnected anyway. If one thing's out of whack, there's a domino effect, and everything else is going to go to pot.
It's about
yeah. So you got the Purpose Clarity Guide at kentmurawski.com. It's in the show notes, and then their book, Rest Assured. And you also got another book coming out, because I've been kind of on this journey with you because we're in the same mastermind group. So we've been hearing about this book. and
Oh, for a
now
while
it's
now.
closed. So tell us a little bit about it, Kent.
Good one.
Yeah, so it's going to be it's about this issue of wholeness, and I'll introduce the Rhythms of Rest framework. But really, the premise behind it is the answer to burnout and overwhelm is having a life plan, because it tells us how to really, and create our lives around the things that matter. So
Yeah.
I think I'm going to probably name it the life plan. Um, and that will be the work. But if people want to hear more about that as I get closer to developing that, probably the best way to do that is I have a weekly newsletter, and it's just kentmurawski.com/catalyst. So that's my weekly newsletter. People can sign up. That they'll get all the updates, and I send out a weekly email with actionable advice for high achievers every week. So
awesome, great. So, any last parting words, Kent and Gina, for these busy, sometimes overworked married business owners and spouses, and anything to kind of give them some hope and clarity and direction?
how about you?
That's a good question. I think communicate. Just talk about how you're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about everything, even if it's something hard. I think when you can just let your spouse into like, hey, I'm feeling like this. That's probably the best advice I would have, is to talk, and you can do it. Encourage each other, talk to one another. Don't do it alone.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, and I'd say I agree with that wholeheartedly. I'd say do the hard work of self-awareness. Some of the ancient philosophers would talked about concepts like know thyself, and Aristotle, Socrates. They all talked about this idea of being self-aware. There's something to like getting to know yourself enough to know your limits that I think is really important, that a lot of high achievers just blow right past because it's all about the mission of doing the thing. But that being said, I also wanted to say thank you to you two. Robert, I've enjoyed getting to know you over the last couple of years. Every time we are in the same place, having a glass of wine, grilling out, whatever we're doing, I always just appreciate your wisdom, and I appreciate you have a really peaceful demeanor, and I'm sure that's been hard won at times. And Kaylee, I'm just getting to know you, but thanks so much for both of you just doing this podcast for business leaders and bringing this issue of work-life balance to the world and inviting us on. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Kent.
Yes,
Gina,
thanks, you
appreciate
guys.
it. Yeah. So somehow we're gonna have to make our way to the Boston area, and we'll do it. Or when you're out the West Coast, because it is
you can
warmer.
come out here because Gina likes the warm weather.
Yeah, exactly.
They do like the warm weather. They might pick up on that.
All right. Well, thanks, and Kent and Gina, for coming on, and for you listening. You're still listening, so that means it's been impactful. So please share this episode to another married entrepreneur who needs to hear this. And until next week, God bless you. Thank you for listening to the Thriving in Tandem podcast. Please visit our website, marriedentrepreneur.co, for a variety of free resources to help your marriage and business succeed.
And feel free to leave us a review and share this episode with another married entrepreneur. That would mean so much to us.
See you next week.